The rain poured down on the dark streets of New Chicago, as Jake Carter huddled under a broken awning with his worn backpack and thin jacket that did little to keep him warm on this cold night. And he had been living on these streets for 3 months now after his foster home had kicked him out on his 18th birthday with nothing but the clothes on his back and a few dollars in his pocket. He was about to move to find better shelter when he heard a soft whimpering sound coming from the alley nearby, and despite his own problems, Jake had always been the kind of person who could not ignore someone in pain. So he grabbed his backpack and walked toward the sound, with careful steps through the puddles and trash. What he found made him stop in his tracks, because there in the darkest corner of the alley was a girl who looked about his age, but she was clearly not human, and her skin had a soft blue glow even in the darkness, and her hair was long and silver like moonlight, and she wore strange clothes that seemed too fancy for this part of town. But what shocked him most was that her eyes were covered with a white cloth, and she was trembling as she sat against the wet brick wall. The alien girl sensed his presence and turned her head toward him with fear clear on her face. And she spoke in perfect English, but with a musical accent that he had never heard before. And she said, "Please do not hurt me. I am lost, and I cannot see. And I need to find a healer before it is too late." Jake knelt down beside her and kept his voice gentle as he said, "I am not going to hurt you. I am Jake, and I want to help you. But I need to know what happened to you, and why you are out here alone in this part of the city." The girl relaxed a little when she heard the kindness in his voice, and she explained that her name was Luna, and she had come to Earth with her family for important business, but there had been an attack on their transport, and she had been separated from her guards, and during the chaos something had damaged her eyes, and now she was blind, and without her medicine she would lose her sight forever, unless she could reach a healer within the next few hours. Jake felt his heart squeeze with sympathy, because he knew what it was like to be alone and helpless in a world that did not care. And he made a decision right then that he would help this strange alien girl no matter what it took. And he said, "I know a place where there is a healer who works with aliens, and I can take you there, but it is across the city and we will have to move." Fast Luna reached out her hand, and Jake took it gently, and he was surprised by how cold her fingers were, and he realized she must have been out here for a long time, and he quickly took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, even though it meant he would be colder. And then he helped her stand, but her legs were too weak to walk. Without hesitation, Jake turned his back to her and said, "Climb on, I will carry you." And Luna hesitated for only a moment before she wrapped her arms around his neck and let him lift her onto his back, and despite being homeless and underfed, Jake was still strong enough to carry her, and he started moving through the rain-soaked streets with determination. As they traveled, Luna told him more about herself, but she was careful not to reveal everything, and she said she was from a planet called Viridian, and her people had special abilities related to light and energy, but her blindness cut her off from those powers and made her vulnerable. And she spoke of her love for music, and how she missed seeing the stars, and Jake listened to every word as he navigated through the dangerous neighborhoods. They had only gone a few blocks when trouble found them, because 3 men stepped out from the shadows and blocked their path, and the leader was a tall man with scars on his face. And he looked at Luna with greedy eyes and said, well, what do we have here? And that is a pretty alien girl you got there, boy, and I think we will take her off your hands, because there are people who pay good money for exotic aliens." Jake felt Luna tighten her grip around his neck in fear, and he knew he had to protect her. And he said in a steady voice, "She is sick and needs a healer, and I am taking her there, so just let us pass, and there does not need to be any trouble." The scarred man laughed, and his friends moved closer, and he said, "I do not think you understand your situation, kid, and you are just some homeless nobody, and she is worth more than you will ever see in your whole life. So hand her over, or we will take her by force." But Jake had grown up fighting to survive, and he had learned to read people. And he could see that these men were bullies who expected him to give up easily, and instead he did something they did not expect, and he ran straight at them with Luna still on his back. He ducked under the first man's grab and kicked the second man in the knee and sent him tumbling, and then he was past them and running down the street as fast as his legs could carry him. And behind him he heard the men shouting and chasing after them, and Luna held on tight and whispered directions when she heard the sounds of the city around them. Because even blind, her hearing was better than any human. Jake ran through alleys and over fences and through an abandoned building, and his lungs burned and his legs ached. But he did not stop, because Luna was counting on him, and finally, after what felt like forever, he lost their pursuers in the maze of the old industrial district. He slowed down to catch his breath, and Luna said softly, "You did not have to risk yourself for me, and you do not even know who I am." And Jake replied between gasps, "I know you are someone who needs help, and that is enough for me." They continued their journey, and Luna began to ask Jake about his life, and he told her about losing his parents when he was young, and bouncing between foster homes and ending up on the streets, and he spoke without bitterness, just stating facts, and Luna listened with a sadness in her voice, as she said, "You have suffered much for one so young, and yet you still choose to help a stranger." Jake shrugged, even though she could not see it, and said, "Someone once told me that the measure of a person is what they do when no one is watching, and I guess I just want to be someone I can be proud of." Finally, they reached the building where the healer worked, and it was a small clinic in the basement of an old apartment complex, and Jake carried Luna down the stairs and knocked on the reinforced door, and after a moment, a viewing slot opened and suspicious eyes looked out. Jake explained the situation quickly, and mentioned that Luna was an alien who needed urgent care for her eyes, and the eyes in the slot studied them both before the door opened to reveal a short elderly woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun, and she introduced herself as Dr. Helen Price, and she ushered them inside immediately. The clinic was small but clean, and filled with strange equipment for treating various alien species, and Dr. Price had Luna sit on an examination table while she scanned her eyes with a device that hummed softly, and the doctor's expression grew serious as she worked. She finally said, "The damage is severe and I can stabilize her condition, but she will need specialized treatment that I do not have the equipment for here, and she will need to contact her family because this kind of care is expensive and beyond what my clinic can provide." Luna's face fell, and she said quietly, "My family will be searching for me, but I do not know if they can find me in time, and without my sight I am helpless." Jake stepped forward and said, "Do whatever you can to help her, and I will figure out a way to pay for it somehow." And Dr. Price looked at this homeless boy who had nothing yet was willing to give everything, and she smiled and said, "I will do what I can, and we will worry about payment later." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Price worked on Luna's eyes while Jake waited nearby, and he watched as the doctor applied special medications and used devices that seemed almost magical. And slowly the tension in Luna's face eased and she seemed to be in less pain. Finally, Dr. Price stepped back and said, "I have done all I can, and her eyes are stabilized, but she needs to rest. And by morning, we will know if her sight can be saved." And Jake felt relief wash over him, and he realized how much he had come to care about this alien girl in just a few short hours. Luna reached out her hand and Jake took it, and she said, "Thank you, Jake Carter, and you have shown me more kindness than I have ever known, and I will not forget what you have done for me this night." Jake was about to respond when the clinic door burst open with a bang, and suddenly the small room was filled with armed figures in dark armor, and they moved with military precision, and their weapons were pointed at Jake and Dr. Price. And at the center of this group was a tall alien woman who looked like an older version of Luna, and her face was a mask of cold fury. The woman's eyes locked onto Luna, and her expression changed to relief for just a moment before the anger returned, and she turned to Jake and said in a voice like ice, "You will explain why my daughter was found in the worst part of your city, injured and blind and traveling with a human street urchin." Dr. Price stepped forward and said, "Now wait just a minute. And this young man saved your daughter's life and carried her through dangerous streets to get her medical help, and you should be thanking him, not threatening him." But the woman ignored her and kept her eyes on Jake, and Luna suddenly spoke up with surprising strength in her voice and said, "Mother, stop this at once, and Jake risked everything to help me when he had no reason to, and he is the bravest and kindest person I have ever met, and you will treat him with respect." The woman looked shocked to be spoken to this way by her daughter, and Jake suddenly understood that this was not just any alien family.